And with Uranus still at 26 degrees of Taurus, that means, there's still this alignment with Algol, the fixed star, Medusa, so the energy of kind of like losing one's head. There is this cycle of rebirth happening, especially with something like a transformative Pluto-Moon conjunction. That is the purpose of Pluto. Hello and welcome to Trust Your Glitter podcast. This is Christy Belich and I am here with the astrology of July the 15th through the 21st. I need to open this podcast this week and say I was wrong. My weekly podcast from last week, I said that there would be no new headlines until this Monday's week. So this was the week that I thought there would be the big new breaking news. But in true Mars-Uranus alignment fashion, she showed up and that was on July 13th. And so the breaking headlines is that former President Donald Trump got shot at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. And so many astrologers, myself included, have videos and podcasts and discussions and posts and, blog thingies out there talking about Trump's natal chart and how activated it is right now. His chart is so activated. And I thought coming out of all of the trines and sextiles at the beginning of the week that we would be in sort of this electric energy, but that electric energy would find its way with the conjunction, which is at 10:05 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday, July the 15th at 26 degrees of Taurus. Now, I have a whole Uranian special. I put that out on Friday, so I have a video for all of the Uranian events that have happened since April 20th's initial alignment with Jupiter and Uranus in the sign of Taurus, and then I just go through each date and kind of talk about the buildup of events, because yes, Uranus is like sudden shocks, which this is. Like, this is so Uranian. This is like Uranus 101 in astrology. Like, chaos, you can't predict this, you can't expect this. These are these types of things that are just kind of out of control, that circus energy. And so yesterday, so I'm recording this Sunday, July 14th. Yesterday, we did have a first quarter moon in Libra. And the first quarter moon was in a T-square with Chiron as well as the sun. So this T-square is kind of tough energy. Here's the thing as an astrologer, it's so tough to know the what. It's so tough to know like what the what is. My intuition says one thing, and then with Uranus, it just like out of left field. So yesterday when this happened, like I was reviewing his chart and I was like, well, his chart, Donald Trump's chart, his midheaven, like the highest point in his chart is 24 degrees of Taurus. And Mars went over that already, but Mars has passed that. And yesterday during the event, Mars was at 25 degrees of Taurus. And so it did activate that midheaven. It was almost like the spark. That was the spark lit. Should I like be less hard on myself because this is astrology and what astrology does? It's a lesson for me as an astrologer to also lean in. I am an intuitive astrologer, but to lean in to the classical astrology, especially in moments like this. And so I just need to like say, I made a mistake. The other piece of this was we have these oppositions from Venus to Pluto. And in Trump's chart, he specifically has this in his 12th house, this opposition where Venus is in his personal 12th house, which is a spiritual house, but it's also kind of hidden stuff in many ways. And so he is having a 12th house opposition while Pluto is in his 6th house of, yes, it is his health. It's also daily routines, daily events. So it's just a very interesting moment in history. And I saw a meme that was like, it's like a person like smoking, and it's just like millennials living through their 180 plus something historic event. But it's just like these kinds of events that we keep continuing to see related to violence. And yes, Mars is like sudden explosions, chaos, and this is exactly Mars-Uranus right here. So I'm not going to get into the extreme details. I know that online is going wild like a circus with different theories and possibilities and all these angles that people are taking. But I'm going to look at this from the astrological perspective that Trump's chart in general is that of a sacred clown, that of a sacred mirror, who was born under a lunar eclipse. So a lunar eclipse is a full moon eclipse. His north node is conjunct the sun, and so is Uranus in his chart in Gemini. And if you want to get into the extreme details, I will link in the show notes as well, but I have a full description of his chart. The date is wrong for his trial date because it was the first trial date, which was July 11th, which has now been moved. Thank you, Lady of the Lamps, for commenting. My friend Kristen Bailey is an amazing reader. Check her out. She reads Cards of Destiny, and she is so on point. But she also reminded me, hey, the trial's been moved to September 18th, and the trial, his rescheduled date, is actually in alignment with the upcoming fall eclipse cycles. So I do keep saying all roads point to September, and I do still want to stand by that. I'm going to go with the classical astrology as well. So I will be reporting on all the upcoming, like the Mercury retrograde that's about to happen. We're going to have a lot of mutable, fixed kind of combating. I don't know if we can say mutable and fixed signs are going to be combating, but it's just going to be a circus. Let's just say that. It's just, we have a circus on the way. We're already in one, but it's kind of like, I remember in 2016, Showtime had this docuseries legit called The Circus, and it was talking about the elections, and this kind of reminds me of that whole energy. It's, we're bringing in a lot of stuff at once, and it even reminds me of the fact that, 2020, we went through these great conjunctions for a purpose. Donald Trump served that purpose, whether you like it or not. He's serving that purpose now, whether you like it or not. And, we still have Leo season on the way, and we still have this week's astrology on the way. So let's get into that, because this week I have, again, a Uranian special out, but I just want to highlight that we open up the week with this conjunction. It's an alignment that is just unpredictable. So Mars, action, fire, war. Uranus, electricity, chaos, related to Aquarian energy in the sign of Taurus, who just wants stability. But Uranus has been in Taurus on and off, or for the better, since 2018. And Taurus is an earth sign, grounded, fixed, wants to hold, doesn't want to budge from nothing. So Uranus has been moving through the sign of Taurus, and we've experienced a ton. We've already experienced Mars-Uranus conjunctions, but not in this matter. Not right in this way, in this specific amount of time, where we already started off the season with a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. So I want to point that out. And this week is a ramp-up week, so it's going to get more intense, which is hard for me to even wrap my brain around, that it's going to get more intense than this. And by the way, I could be wrong. Who knows? It could be hearts and rainbows by the time we get to the end of the week, which ends, we have a bookend week with a full moon in Capricorn, and it is our blue moon. It is the second in the series of the Capricorn full moon series as well. And before I came into this reading, I sat in as good a meditation as I could have sat in. And I was just like, how do I even put logic to this right now? And I'm going to keep turning to the moon. So I actually have the chart of the full moon up, and I will get to that reading in a moment. So that is July 15th for us. It doesn't stop there. And it doesn't mean that that is the only thing for us that's going on this week. And so I just want to point that out, because when it comes to the transits of the week, we have Mars enter Gemini on the 20th of July, and then the full moon is on the 21st in Capricorn at 29 degrees of Capricorn. So when it comes to the aspects this week, I want to say that the aspects this week are also, with this conjunction, intense, but there is an intensity overall. We open up the week also with a Sun square Chiron in Aries. This is the T-square that the quarter moon, the first quarter moon, was in. Now, when I looked at the moon last week, I saw it as this very relational energy, this very mirrored energy, Libra wanting to balance. So if I'm going to look at this from, say, like I'm taking right now in this recording, right now as I sit down and record, I'm thinking out loud on how this energy reflects as we head into the full moon. It's intense. But here's my thought process. My thought process is Libra wants to balance, wants to network, wants to be relational, social butterfly energy, across from Chiron, wounded healer, Aries, Mars ruled, Libra being Venus ruled. So we have this pattern of Venus-Mars, because also the conjunctions in a Venusian sign with Mars. So again, the duality here is the sacred twin energy of Mars and Venus. Yet at the same time, there is a square to the sun. And so the square to the sun gives us this grit. It gives us a little edge. Now the sun is in Cancer, which is ruled by the moon. So as we open up the week, when I was on my Uranian episode, and I even did a blog post about this, the card I pulled was the Chariot, and it's the only card that I pulled for this conjunction. And so the moon is saying, hey, when you get lost, look to the moon. And when we open up this week, the moon is in Scorpio in a waxing gibbous phase. So it's heading towards fullness. And there is this area of understanding. There is this area of intuition. I think it even further reflects in the chart of the full moon. And I was talking with a friend, and we were talking about whole sign astrology and tropical default. I guess it's like a default way of looking at our charts, but it's also kind of a very westernized way. Like if I were to really think about this, and then also Vedic sidereal charts, and even 13 signs astrology. At the end of the day, synchronicity all aligns. Even down to our doshas, our human design charts, our numerology, it's all synchronicity. And so I think that the amount of synchronicity we're going to have this week is going to be like to the highest degree. It's going to be like things fold into one another, because we are at such, it's like static electricity. We can feel the static, and we can understand like that feeling of like being cosmically aligned. This is a very old school reference, and this like cites my age as a very elder millennial. But there was this show called 6 Feet Under, and it was my favorite show. It's still one of my absolute favorite shows, just because of the character development and the storyline. And there is a prominent character that passes away in one of the seasons. I'm trying not to like spoiler alert it, but and one of their references is the static. And I think it's even like the name of an episode, but it's like about the static. Do you feel the static? And I was like, that's super Aquarian Uranian energy. It's like this feeling of static, like even with the Pluto opposition with Venus and Leo, it is static. It's noise, but it's noise we can't particularly, there's things that are distracting us from the actual truth, the root of the scenario here. And what actually gets to the root is this upcoming full moon, because it is extreme Pluto energy. It is a callback to 2020. Like, and the reason why I'm saying this is like in real time as I do this reading, I'm like, holy shit, like time is so relative. We just get to see history like semi-repeat itself in a different way. So when I look at this week ahead, I kind of want to jump to looking at this chart instead of just doing dates like on this day we're going to have Sun sextile Uranus on the 18th. And on the 18th we're also having Mercury trine Chiron, which can be very nice. And the Sun semi-square Jupiter. I don't know if that's going to be helpful. Is that going to be helpful? Or Venus trine the North Node, which actually is quite helpful. It's very beautiful on the 19th. I actually really like the Venus trine the North Node. Trines are like these very easy energy, easy going. It's natural. But I really think what we're going to have, like if I were going to zoom out and say this week it embodies things we cannot freaking control. Intuition and synchronicity in the highest form, not in a watery way though, not how we opened up last week. You're in the vibes, you're in the frequency, you're in, like if I were to correlate this to music, I'm going back to the blues. It's like you're sitting in blues, jazz, like freeform, freestyle jazz. So the chart of the full moon, July the 21st, 2024, is a release. So it's like, I'm going to go back, like last week I was talking about how a sextile is like the strings of a guitar. You have to tighten the strings of a guitar to the point of tension so that sound is created. So now we're looking at this week, if I were to think about this in music terms, an electric guitar solo. And then we go through the week, the band comes in, and then this is like the face melting solo. Like this is like everybody in the crowd's going like wild. It's just like, I don't know, insert favorite band and just think about like one of your favorite artists just like in their flow. And you know when you watch, like even a rapper, if you're watching a rapper, like just in their flow, in the vibe, in the sound. Like this, we're in the sound. And this is July the 21st. And I have the chart East Coast time, but say you're on the West Coast, so it's 6:17 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, it would be 3:17 a.m. Pacific Time. So just put yourself in the time zone. And then the chart that I have here, I have put in tropical. So I'm reading a standard tropical chart with an ascendant. So I'm going to do it as, I'm doing this kind of as this event set for the full moon. And so I'm going to read it just like a regular chart. So think about, open up the week, chaos, unknown thing, the news, the media is going to be moving this week. There's going to be so much media this week. And when Mars enters, so for this chart, Mars is in Gemini. So why I said this is going to be the headline week, we're going to have a lot of breaking news this week. That's a prediction. I could be wrong, by the way. But I just see with like the positioning of Jupiter already in Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury, and then, Mars going through the conjunction and then entering the sign of Gemini, and then we have a full moon. More news is on the way. And I'm going to say headliner breaking week. Like more shit, more stuff on the way. And not just with like Donald Trump, but like other stuff. Again, I could be wrong. It could be the easiest flowing week ever. But I just see this astrology and I'm like, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Because of this chart also, with the sun at 29 degrees of Cancer, opposing this moon at 29 degrees of Capricorn, and the midheaven of this chart has Chiron conjunct the midheaven, which was triggered. This Chiron worked with the quarter moon on the day Trump got shot. So now we're taking that and putting it in the highest point. And by the way, like, other people got shot too. Like, and also I'm like a very Pluto, Mars, Aries person. So for me, if I don't seem very compassionate when I talk about these things, I have a dry sense of humor when it comes to a lot of stuff. And that's just how I deal and how I cope. If I need to do something, I create something. If I feel bad, like, and that is what this chart is about as well. So there's another aspect in this chart is Mercury is square Uranus. That again is electricity. Squares are grit, 90 degrees away from each other. So Mercury being in Leo is squaring what already just went through this big conjunction. So there's like metal, pedal to the metal energy here, I guess. Or grinding down something, creating a spark, filing something. There's that kind of energy here. But the thing that really got me when I looked at this chart was there is an aspect called a cradle. And a cradle in astrology is a very creative aspect of something that's already being fostered. So a cradle consists of an opposition. So our opposition is the sun and the moon in the full moon aspect. Now, the moon also has Pluto there. Pluto is at 0 degrees of Aquarius in retrograde, heading back to, nobody can see me that I'm like pointing out to nowhere, but heading back towards the moon, or heading back towards heading into Capricorn and will. And then this is considered a Pluto moon conjunction. That's intense as fuck already. Then we have a nice energy of a trine between Mars, who's now entered Gemini at 0 degrees, and Pluto in Aquarius. So the trine is harmonious. We also have a trine from the Sun to Neptune, who's in retrograde at 29 degrees of Pisces. And then from Mars to Neptune, we have what's called a sextile. From Neptune to Pluto moon, we have a sextile. And from the Sun and Mars, we have a sextile. So that is considered a cradle, and it literally looks like a baby cradle. And the aspect is like you are holding this baby. The universe is holding this cosmic baby. So the baby has been birthed. That birth took place on the Mars-Uranus conjunction. So now this is really holding and harmonizing and nurturing that baby. And I think it's extremely symbolic because legit, y'all, the next freaking day is the sun is entering the sign of Leo, which is literally like babies. How does this not make people emotional? Astrology is synchronistic, yeah. It is so synchronistic. This is like pure beauty. And the other thing is the part of fortune, which is something called an Arabic part. It's a calculated point. So it's more like theoretics in astrology, is right on this full moon in Aquarius. And the ascendant, girl, the ascendant of this full moon is at 4 degrees of Leo, making the descendant of 4 degrees of Aquarius with the part of fortune on that, and technically Pluto's there. I mean, this astrology this week, this is the week. This is the full moon. And we had the first part of this at 0 degrees of Capricorn already. So we've seen the beginning of this. We've been playing with this energy since mid-June. And full moons are about letting go of the past. Full moons are about, I mean, if you do a full moon ceremony, throw something away. I honestly would say, like, literally throw something away. And be like, hey, this is going to get put in the trash at this point. Whether it's, something physical, or whether it's something in your life that legit, it's time to just say it's time to go. When you gotta go, you gotta go. Now, I'm not saying the baby in the cradle. I'm not saying the energy that's being fostered. Here's how I'm gonna say this. Pluto moon doesn't want to deal with no shit no more. And if in any capacity you've not nurtured yourself in some way, if you've compromised yourself in any way for anybody or anything or any scenario, with this moon being in capitalism, Capricorn, the capitalistic standards that we hold currently, and are revisiting the U.S. Pluto return with this. I'm looking at this from the U.S. standpoint right now. This is a political situation. And with Chiron on the midheaven of this is a wound. This is a battle wound in Aries. Now, the North Node of this chart is in the 9th house in Aries, which I like, putting the South Node in the 3rd house. So this is like larger world stuff. And with Uranus still at 26 degrees of Taurus, that means, there's still this alignment with Algol, the fixed star, Medusa. So the energy of kind of like losing one's head, or cool, or the crown chakra energy. Although this is the deepest intuition, there is this cycle of rebirth happening for so many at this time, especially with something like a transformative Pluto moon conjunction. That is the purpose of Pluto. The other thing I want to point out, and as this links into next week as well, and I'd be interested to see what happens when Mercury gets to 29 degrees of Leo right before entering the sign of Virgo, because 29 degrees brings up another fixed star, Regulus, which is royal energy, which folds into kind of Trump's chart as well, and kind of his purpose and how he was even brought in to administration, and Regulus being kicked up. And because he is born under an eclipse, the eclipses that brought him in were actually, technically, he's holding this patterned astrology. That we're going to have more news with Trump, but there is definitely world events going on simultaneously. Obviously, everything going on with Israel, Palestine, but we're going to see, I'm not sure. There might be another unpredictable thing with Biden. I think it's going to get more and more apparent of his mental cognitive situation as well. That's, not a shot in the dark at this point. But if I were to predict the week ahead, it's be really kind to yourself, be really nurturing to yourself, step back from media, especially with that 9th house North Node for the full moon. It is about like wider events, but it doesn't mean you need to absorb it, especially if you're an empath. There are times to ground yourself, even in times where there's a storm all around us. So just trust your gut here, trust your glitter, trust who you are, trust what trust what you've already been fostering for yourself. And if there are people and situations that need to be cut away out of your life to serve that truth or that root you've been fostering, say you're working on sovereignty or authenticity or authority, and there are haters in your life, you can say no to them. You can say, hey, this is the thing that I'm growing and cultivating. And I really think as Mars enters the sign of Gemini, on a personal level for yourself, this is going to be something that allows you to express. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great week ahead. Take care.